Welcome to Made in Science, the official podcast of the University of Stuttgart. My name is Wolfgang Holtkamp, and I'm Senior Advisor on International Affairs and your host for this podcast. In today's episode, we welcome Dr. Brighton Austin Chunga. His academic career started at the University of Malawi with a Bachelor of Science degree in Irrigation Engineering. Afterwards, working for the Malawi Ministry of Water Development and Irrigation, he realized that further education could help him to solve water-related challenges in his home country. Thus, he came to the University of Stuttgart with a scholarship to acquire his master's degree in WAREM, short for Water Resources Engineering and Management. With another scholarship, he had the opportunity to pursue his PhD in Water Resources Management at Cranfield University in the UK. Ever since, he has worked as postdoctoral researcher and lecturer both at Stellenbosch University in South Africa and Mzuzu University in Malawi to help improve water management in Africa. Today, I want to talk with him about some of the challenges in water management, the sustainability of support by NGOs, the role of governments in water policy, and much more. Hello, Brighton.
Thank you so much, Wolfgang, for this nice welcome, and it's always nice to be back to Stuttgart after actually 11 years. I can look back, it was last that we officially was at the Stuttgart University in 2011, and it's been great to be with you here, and I look forward to chatting with you about water and my journey into the field. Thank you.
You're very welcome. We just heard about your life and learned that, how can I say it, that water runs all the way through it. Please let me ask you, what water meant to you before you started studying it compared to now?
Well, I mean, it's a nice question, and at first, I think before I started studying water, I had an ambition to do accounting and all that, and I remember very well my secondary school teacher was like, "Oh, you're very good at mathematics, so you could actually do." You could be an accountant or something like that. But obviously, I was mesmerized by irrigation engineering, and that time actually, irrigation engineering was quite very new in Malawi, and I realized that. Irrigation at that time when I was in secondary school, I didn't know that irrigation engineering involves water. But until I started working, I started studying irrigation engineering, I realized, wow, so this is something is involving water. And ever since, I think the interest has gone so much, and it has gone from irrigation, and it goes now to water supply management and also to catchment management. So it has been a very interesting journey, starting from very small with having an idea of studying water. But the moment I started studying irrigation engineering, then the whole thing just came out. And also basically with a study in water resources engineering at Stuttgart, that opened a whole lot of interest in me. And then I said, well, I want to pursue water resources. So it's been very, very nice.
In your studies and in your work, what surprised you most about water?
Great. So what really surprised me about water is actually the idea that water is free. The idea that water is free so that it's given on, everyone should have it. But what is really surprising is how much, how much maybe governments they take, how much investment is required to get water from where it is to where a person is. It involves money and it involves that. But if you can see that, if you think about water as a human right, to say water, one should have water for free, and then the idea of taking water from where it is to where a person is, that's really fascinating. And in fact, until today, we still have that challenge where people would think, well, water is completely free. But if you're looking at where it is, and you take it to where a person is. This is quite fascinating, and it's quite really surprising, because I thought like everyone should know, but yeah, it's quite surprising, and also that water is very, very important in everything that we do.
Let us focus on that a little more. You have dedicated your life to water management. Why is water management, in the context that you just described, such a problematic issue?
Thank you so much. That's really, in fact, that's even my interest right away now is really looking at the water management. So over a long time, so we need to be very careful here, because we're talking about the global south and then the global north. So the way you might actually look at it might be very different, but the way the global south might look at it might be very different. So we're looking at our case, for example, there might be economical water hardships. In other ways, having distributional challenges, infrastructure to get water to where it is. And now if you've got a mentality of people who think to say water is free and therefore it has to be offered for free, it means that you need more investment from the government side to make sure that water is distributed. So at a very low price, of course, because maybe people are poor or whatsoever. But it is very, very important also as we look at water provision, but how we take care of water is also very, very key. And therefore, the thinking that water is free and it is freely given, sometimes communities or people, they do not care about water resources. So I'm talking about issues to do with if they are living closer to catchments, do they take care about water resources? Do they do catchment degradation? There are a lot of catchment degradation that is happening in the global south. You talk of deforestation and all that. So it's the whole idea that if you think that water is important, is very, very key, and therefore it's just not freely given, and therefore everyone will be able now to start managing water resources. So everyone has a role to play in water resources.
Brighton, there are many NGOs supporting local water projects on the African continent. From your experience, how sustainable are such projects, and what does it need to make them perhaps even more sustainable?
Thank you so much. That's an interesting question, because I had that encounter during my PhD research, because my PhD research was looking at how do we involve, it was more of catchment hydrology, but also looking at the management of it from the local perspective, a local community perspective. So I realized that there are a number of organizations in Africa who are involved in water resources management and development, and that's very, very good, because water resources provision, as I've said already, it's a problem in rural Africa, for example, and indeed this is a role that NGOs they are playing. However, we have an issue here to talk about sustainability of these NGOs. So the problem is, what I've seen in my work is that there is a disjoint in terms of implementation of activities between the government and the NGOs. If there is in a situation or in a country, I don't know, in a region where these they work together very well, then you see good fruits. But if you see an NGO that it just comes in and maybe provides water resources or I don't know what other help, and then they leave without really involving the government, who are always there, who have got people, personnel maybe in the whole country, and then they if they don't get involved, then the sustainability of that program or a project by NGO is not really very good, because as I've said already, we're coming from the point of say water is free. So unless you, as an NGO, if you want your work to be sustainable, it's very, very important to involve the government. At whatever level you involve the government, it is always important, whether at a national level, at a regional level, at a district level. It's very, very important, because those government officers who take over your role or who take over the project to sustain it further.
Brighton, you worked at the Ministry of Water Development and Irrigation in Malawi for a couple of years. How important are governments in making a change when it comes to water policy?
Governments are actually at the core, I would say so. So they are at the core of making policies. This is a huge subject as well, because government, indeed, by its position, by its authority, they are the ones who develop policies, they promulgate it, and then make sure that it's used. But having said that the government is really there to make policies. I have at least two challenges, or rather two things to talk about. Number one is to have a policy which is evidence based. In other ways, you cannot just make a policy in an office and then that's it. No, you have to have evidence based policies. In fact, these years, or I should say maybe this time, we really look at evidence-based policy. Environment and water, they all require to say, why are you making that policy? Is it supported by science and all that? That's another part. But the other part that I actually have, and which I've also been looking at, is the implementation part of it. Because you see, Wolfgang, you can make nice policies, not so you can have nice policies is an ideal. But to implement those policies is a huge gap. And in Africa, I should say, that is a big challenge. That is a big challenge where we have a policy, but it's not implemented. And therefore, why should you develop a policy if you can't implement? So those are the biggest challenges that I have. Either making a policy that is evidence based, but also making a policy that you can implement. So the government has got a huge role that they do in policy per se.
Along these lines, in your current occupation as a postdoctoral researcher and also as a lecturer at two universities, is there any chance of trying to teach exactly this to students? The combination, the responsibility, the spectrum of broad challenges that you have mentioned already?
Yes, I mean it's quite interesting, and I should say that in Mzuzi University, I get a chance as well to teach a particular course which is very much related. We call it water policy, ethics, and I think on implementation, I think we call like that. So we call it water policy and ethics and implementation. So this is a course that really tells students to say, look here, the government is there to implement, to develop policies, but these policies, they need to be, evidence-based. By evidence-based, in other ways, I mean that everyone should be involved in coming up with a policy. The policy has to be, if it is developed, they have to involve people, consultation and all that. And then all the way up to implementation. So I also teach how do you implement a policy, in the context that you are. So yes, I find many chances where I teach students as well as my colleagues in terms of water policy implementation as well as development. So there are actually chances that they do that, and very interestingly is because I am kind of like in between. So I am part of me is an engineering point of view, and part of me is a management point of view. So I balance it very well on how you can actually even take the engineering part to make sure that it informs the policy. And this is why I'm saying the evidence-based policy development. Thank you.
And if we look at your research, what are you currently working on, and what do you want to achieve with it?
All right. So what I'm working on is very interesting. It's something that started, I should say, actually it now goes back to Stuttgart days. I remember then my supervisor, Professor Karl Marx and Wiesprich, I'm sure she's still there. So my research actually involved looking at system dynamics modeling, so looking at water allocation. And I was really fascinated by looking at water resources allocation, and it was really applicable. At that time, actually, I was doing with the International Water Management Institute, but that has actually kept me going because I realized, so we have a problem, let's say, for example, in Africa in terms of water allocation, and this is a big challenge. And I think back then in 2011, I thought like that is a challenge then, and we solve it. But as I've said, like 11 years down the line, I'm still here looking at the water allocation. Why? Is because we still have a problem where we've got water somewhere and you don't have water somewhere. And then you have to look at water allocation. So my current actually study now, research with Stellenbosch University, as well as Cranfield. Not Cranfield, rather Mzuzu University. We're looking at water availability, catchment water availability. So we're looking at number one is we're looking at in the future how much water is going to be available. For example, in a particular catchment, we call it basin closure analysis. But the second thing, we're looking at water allocation. So at a farm level. So for example, imagine if you've got a water in a dam, and how can you allocate it to, for example, because we are targeting farmers, and these are rural farmers. They don't have big land, but maybe we are targeting to say they can rear fish, for example, in a pond, and then in a small field they can have an irrigation. They can do irrigation planting crops. So ideally, what I'm doing is how do you allocate water in such kind of situation? So we did a number of studies, but now I'm actually looking now at a bigger scale. So I'm scaling up in terms of the catchment.
Brighton, I'm curious to find out, how do you find your research projects? Do they come to you, or do you have to look for them?
Interesting. So I think I should say I've been maybe one of the lucky ones. I search for them, and I have to say this, Wolfgang, it's been an interesting journey, because in my undergraduate at University of Malawi, then now it's Luana, actually I got a scholarship. So during my undergraduate, I got a scholarship to study my undergraduate, because I think I was one of the best students. And then I went to Cranfield, to Stuttgart. It was also a scholarship. In fact, I remember that time I had two scholarships, either to go to Germany and either to go to the UK. And then after that, then I also found a scholarship, Commonwealth, which I applied on my own, and then I got a scholarship to UK. And then just 2 years later, I am here in Stellenbosch. I also found a postdoctoral fellowship. So yeah, so I look for them, but I'm kind of like the lucky one, if you say. Yeah.
Brighton, before coming to Stuttgart, you have acquired a bachelor's degree at the University of Malawi, and subsequently worked at the Ministry of Water Development and Irrigation. How did you end up at the University of Stuttgart? We already heard you had a choice, and then you got a scholarship. Can you explore on that a little more?
Great. So it's been very, very interesting journey for me. In fact, I actually from the University of Malawi straight, I went to work with Ilovo Sugar, which is a private company, and it was more of irrigation engineering, and I really liked it. But because I got a job in Malawi, in the Malawi government as a water resources engineer. Then at that time I had two scholarships. So one in Germany was to do water resources engineering and management, FHAREM, as you know. And the other scholarship that I got was a Commonwealth scholarship that I was supposed to do irrigation at Cranfield University. So the choice for me, it was very interesting. Much as I was presented two opportunities, but it was very interesting. I remember my mentors then was I think he's still at the at Luana at Lilongwe University of Natural Resources. It's now called Luana. Dr. Grivin Chipula, and as well as Dr. Patsan Kumambala. They were my lecturers, and they really advised me very well. They are still my advisors, and so they told me, like, if you're employed as a water resources engineer and you want to to go into water resources, we know that you like water resources, then the best way is to go for Stuttgart University, because there the course is water resources engineering. Unlike if you want to go now just for irrigation, then you can go to Cranfield because it's irrigation engineering. But as I told you that I was fascinated about water and working with the Ilovo, and then working as a water resources engineer, I found that going to Stuttgart would really be the perfect choice, and indeed I made that choice, and I'm here today because of that choice. I actually should say I can add more, because when I came actually to Stuttgart, It's when, because before going to Stuttgart, I knew about water, but then it was more limited into irrigation and all that. Much as I was doing, I was a water sources engineer in the government. Also, I think there was so much, there was a limitation in terms of knowledge in water. But when I came to Stuttgart, I realized that wow. So actually, I can expand this because at Varim, I'm sure they're still doing that. You could actually be so there were three routes. So you were either selecting hydraulic engineering, groundwater engineering, or sanitary engineering. And if you can look at that, that is amazing how Varim did it, because in a way that it encompasses everything. So I was very happy even coming to Stuttgart. I was like, wow, I've made a right choice. I've made a right choice.
So the Varim program, the master's program, an English-speaking program at our university here, made a huge difference and helped you to understand the issue of water more. Are you still in touch with the international students from that program? And are you still in touch with Varim?
I should say I am. I use, in fact, I should say the current. I'm very sure she is the current director of Varim. I think she's Annie Weiss, and she was actually, by the way, when I was actually doing my my masters, she was my German teacher. so it's very interesting to see that she was there, and in fact when I left I still had communication with Schneider, Dr. Schneider, because that time he was the director, and I've been in touch with Stuttgart actually several times, but also with colleagues that I was in class together. Some of them they're still in Germany, and so I've been in touch with with Varim, but not much as I would have expected. But yes, I've been in touch, and they're here. I mean, they're still shaping my life in terms of water resources and all that.
Anne Weiss is the course director now of Varim, so very active in that field. And earlier you mentioned Professor Wiebrecht. She's actually the vice rector currently for diversity and internationalization at our university. So in a way, all roads lead to water, and vice versa, perhaps. What in your career so far has been the most challenging water project for you?
So I have had several water projects, I should say, and one of the challenging one, and I still have the passion, much as I've moved from government to academics, but this is what I'm still trying to work with the government, because now we have got National Water Resources Authority in Malawi. My biggest challenge, and this is very specific for Malawi, but also in Southern Africa, it is to do about data. To get water resources data is a huge problem. In not only in Malawi but also in Southern Africa. I've been working here now with Stellenbosch University and a colleague of mine who is also a postdoc, and we're talking about this about data issues. So if some of the rivers, for example, that we have, they are not gauged, they are not measured, and for you, I mean, to make, for example, I am a system dynamics modeler. To make all those modeling, you need that data. If you don't have data, and then you can't. And this has been a huge challenge that I've had. And I should say a specific project that we had back in Malawi when I was working in the government was the idea of trying to get all the water abstraction in Malawi perhaps to be digitized, so that we can have that data. So if somebody says, maybe Wolfgang says interested to have a project in Malawi, maybe want to invest in a hydropower. If you go in a particular catchment, we should just be able to say, here is the data, here is how water flows, this is how much we have in the river and all that. But that has actually remained a huge problem, and is still a problem until now. And what I'm actually doing now is we're trying to work with the National Water Resources Authority, because at that time when I was in the government, we had developed kind of a system where you can actually put data there, and then you can know to say in a particular catchment, this is how much water you have, and this is not what you have. And this is a huge problem, I should say, Wolfgang. It's one of the biggest problem that we have in water resources, because even in groundwater, as we abstract groundwater, we don't know how much groundwater is down there. We've not done huge comprehensive assessments. So even in water resources, even in surface water, we have some data, but we don't have the complete data that we can actually for sure say, okay, fine, this is how much water we have, and therefore we can allocate so much. And the problem is we do not have data. So that has been really a huge challenge that I've had so far in several projects that I've been having, is to have data that is readily available, and that a researcher can work on it, but also investors, they can come and make right decisions.
Over the years, do you see a change in students and the public as far as the understanding of water management is concerned, compared, say, to 10 years ago?
Yeah, I see a huge change. I've seen a huge change in terms of knowledge about water, and you can attest for it now that in our secondary schools, in our primary schools, so there are more lessons to do with water resources. There are more practicals to do with water resources. A child will be able to know what goes, for example, into making sure that water is delivered at your house. So there is a lot of knowledge in terms of where do we get water, or where water is, and so that knowledge is there. And by the way, I should say, COVID-19, we can talk about it. COVID-19 in a way actually has brought a huge awareness about the importance of water. Right? It is a disease that was totally different, but when everyone said, okay, if you wash your hands and then you're going to do so, everyone now is aware about water. And in fact, if you say, can you please preserve water, can you manage water very well, they basically know to say water is very important now. At least because of COVID-19, because everyone knew about the importance of water.
And looking ahead into the future a little bit, under which circumstances can water management issues be solved in the future? What do you think has to change?
All right. So I think looking ahead into the future, there are a number of things that we need to look at. As I've said, the challenges about water resources. So when I'm looking at the future, for me, indeed, is investment has to be there. And number two, the appropriate, I should now use the word appropriate, policies that to be there. But these policies, with investment, therefore they can be implemented. But the other issue that I wanted to talk about is the issue of stakeholder engagement, rather in consultation. So I also see a bit of disjoint here. So you can have private sector. I feel like private sector, much as they're doing it, but they're not doing much enough in terms of water resources. You can have a company sponsoring, let's say, for example, football, which is nice. Of course, it's very, very nice. And you can have a company sponsoring, I don't know, but you never have, those huge leap, provision of resources in terms of water resources management. And I think that also is because of perhaps, I don't know, maybe we've not really marketed water properly, but otherwise we need to engage private sector more. So, they can also contribute. So the stakeholder engagement consultation is key for me. The evidence policy is key for me, and also investment is very key for me. Looking forward, if we want to make huge leaps in terms of water resources management and development.
Your current research at Stellenbosch University is coming to an end soon. Brighton, what is up for you next in your professional work?
Well, it's very interesting. I have left all my cards open. Obviously, I'm going back to Zuzi University as my university, and I love lecturing there, and I'm very sure I'm going to join back the university. But I think I've also tried to, my stay in Stellenbosch University has also prepared me to come up with a number of networking, collaboration with different researchers. And going back to Mzuzu University, I might actually even pick a research project with the University of Pretoria, but which I think I'm going to work where I'm in Malawi. So there are a number of activities that I'm going, but obviously I'm going back to Mzuzu University, but with a number of projects that I've actually trying to initiate while I was here. So yeah.
Brighton, the final part of our conversation is what we have called Moment 7. We have collected 7 questions that we would like to ask you. Please answer them as shortly as possible. Moment 1. Spätzle or Maultaschen?
Maultaschen.
Moment 2. One thing you could change about the world.
Do something.
Moment 3. Do you have a book recommendation for us?
Yes, I have. And the book is, I like it. They call it the Ninja Productivity, How to Be a Productivity Ninja by Graham Alcott.
Moment 4. The best advice you have ever received.
You can do it, and be yourself. You can do it.
Moment 5. Your favorite place on campus at the University of Stuttgart.
Oh, that's Almandring 3.
Moment 6. Please complete the following sentence. If I could start all over again, I would do the following differently.
I would, talk differently, perhaps.
And moment 7. Complete, please, the following sentence. The best thing about Stuttgart is...
the international community.
Brighton, thank you so much for having been with us today. We are very much looking forward to staying in touch and wish you the best of luck with whatever you do.
Thank you so much, Wolfgang, and it was a pleasure having me here, and to all the audience out there, and it's been great, and I always cherish my moments with Stuttgart University, and I've said this more and more again. If I would choose again, I would choose Stuttgart University. Thank you.
Thank you also to our podcast team, and of course to our audience. Thank you for listening today. Please feel free to subscribe to our podcast and also to rate it. Most of all, stay tuned for our conversations that are always based on what is made in science.